He could have bought the entire restaurant. But that night, he just wanted someone to talk to. So the millionaire posed as a driver, thinking he'd vanish unnoticed, until a poor girl sat beside him, smiled, and thanked him for being the only honest one. What happened next wasn't part of any plan. Before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. He didn't even want to go. Ethan Duvall adjusted the rearview mirror out of habit, though he wasn't driving tonight. Not really. The car was his. The suit hanging behind the driver's seat was his. Even the reservation at Leora, the most exclusive restaurant in the city, was in his name. But the man who would walk in through those doors and sit down at the table wasn't going to be him. "You're seriously doing this?" his cousin Max had asked with a laugh when Ethan proposed the idea. "You're sending your driver to pretend to be you on a blind date?" Ethan had shrugged. "It's just a test." More than a test, really. It was a quiet rebellion. After years of being stared at like a prize, Googled before he even said hello, or chased by women hoping for headlines or handouts, he just wanted to meet someone who wasn't impressed by his bank account, someone who didn't know his name. So tonight, he switched roles with Damien, his longtime driver, and waited outside by the car, leaning casually against the passenger door, pretending to check messages. His plan was simple. The date would go south quickly, Damien would return, and Ethan would have proof that love, for him, didn't exist without pretense. He hadn't expected her. She rushed around the corner, clearly late, breathless, strands of her chestnut brown hair slipping from a loose ponytail. Her coat was a little too big, her boots scuffed from the snow, and she clutched a small paperback book under her arm like a shield. She looked down at her phone, then up at the entrance. She hesitated, then turned and looked straight at Ethan. "You're the driver, right?" Ethan blinked. Yeah." She smiled, not forced or flirty, just real. "Thanks for waiting." Before he could explain or correct her, the restaurant door opened and Damien stepped out, adjusting his too-tight tie and looking visibly uncomfortable. "Miss Jensen?" Damien asked. She turned toward him, confused. "You're? That's the guy you were supposed to meet." Ethan interrupted quickly, voice low, almost apologetic. "But it's a bit of a mix-up." She looked between the two of them. "Oh, great. A setup within a setup." Ethan almost smiled. "You okay?" She sighed, her eyes tired. "Honestly, I didn't want to come. My roommate signed me up for this app. Said I needed to meet someone who could afford bread that isn't on clearance." She looked at Damien again, who was clearly out of his depth and already sweating. "No offense to your friend, but I don't think this is going to work." Ethan shrugged. "You're not wrong." She turned back to him and smiled again, this time softer. "Well, at least you're honest. That's rare." Then she said it. "Thank you for being the only honest one." Ethan froze. In all the things he'd planned, that wasn't supposed to happen. "I was about to head out," she added, checking the time. "But I could use a coffee, unless you're on duty." He hesitated, then opened the door for her. "I've got some time." "Then let's ditch the five-star fantasy," she grinned. "There's a tiny cafe around the corner that serves the best cinnamon tea in town. You game, driver?" He nodded. "Lead the way." As they walked side by side under flickering street lamps, Ethan felt something he hadn't in a long time. Not adrenaline, not ego, not the weight of his name. He felt human, and it scared him more than any hostile takeover ever had. They stepped off the main boulevard into a quiet side street, where a tiny cafe flickered like a secret waiting to be told. The sign above the door read Oliver's Nook, and soft jazz music drifted through the crack in the window. Inside, it smelled like cinnamon, burnt sugar, and old books. Nora pushed the door open with her shoulder, letting the warmth wrap around her like an old coat. She looked over her shoulder at Ethan and smiled. This is more my style. No menus with words I need to Google. He followed, nodding slowly, still disarmed by how easily she took the lead and how natural it felt to let her. They found a small table near the window. The chair creaked when Ethan sat. It wasn't the kind of place he'd ever normally find himself in. No polished silverware, no sommelier. Just chipped ceramic mugs and a waitress with tired eyes and a kind voice. "You want the cinnamon tea?" he asked. She nodded. "With oat milk if they have it." He signaled to the waitress, who gave him a once-over, mismatched coat, messy hair, and then jotted down the order. When the woman left, Nora leaned back in her chair, stretching her legs out under the table like she wasn't trying to impress anyone. "I like your silence," she said after a moment. Ethan tilted his head. "What? You're not trying to talk over me? Or impress me with your job or your gym routine? You're just here. I like that." He smiled faintly. "That's a first." She laughed, then caught herself. "Sorry, that sounded mean. I just mean, I've been on dates where the guy orders for me, tells me he owns 3 properties, and then asks if I've thought about fillers." Ethan raised a brow. "Fillers?" "Yeah, like, for my lips." She pointed to her mouth, which, for the record, work perfectly fine as is. "I agree," he said quietly. Her eyes flicked to his, and for a second the air between them shimmered. The tea arrived. They each took a sip. She sighed contentedly. "So," she said, blowing on the steam. "Driver, huh? You like it?" Ethan set his mug down carefully. "It has its moments." She chuckled. "Bet you meet all kinds of people. Some good, some forgettable, some surprising. Am I in the forgettable group?" He looked at her, dead serious. "No." That single word made her glance down, suddenly unsure what to say. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I don't normally talk this much. I don't normally listen this much," he replied. She laughed again, quieter this time. Then, without meaning to, she opened up. About her dad. About the dialysis. About how they used to run a bookstore together before the bills piled up and their apartment flooded. How she worked at the library now during the day and drove rideshare in the evenings. How she hated that people talked to her like she was invisible or worse, disposable. "I don't want someone to fix my life," she said. "I just want someone who doesn't make me feel like I should apologize for it." Ethan said nothing, not because he didn't know what to say, but because saying anything might shatter the moment. Outside, snow had started to fall. Tiny flakes caught in the streetlight, turning the world gold and soft. "You don't say much," she said again, glancing at him. "But you're kind. I can tell." He looked down at his hands. They were clean, manicured, but he felt like an imposter. She leaned in, resting her elbows on the table. "You know, I've gone on dates with guys who claim they're just humble, and then spend the next hour telling me about their startup or their unofficial TED Talk. But you," she paused, "you may not be rich, but you're the richest person I've met tonight." That sentence hit him like a stone through glass. Not because it was insulting, but because it was the first time someone had looked at him, really looked at him, and seen something beyond his last name. He could have told her everything, right then, right there, But something stopped him. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was wonder. Maybe it was the selfish hope that this one moment, this one illusion, could last just a little longer. "Thank you," he said softly. She stood, slipping on her coat. "Come on, driver. I'll walk you back to your car." He followed her into the snow, unsure of where the night or this girl would take him. But for the first time in years, Ethan Duval didn't feel like he was pretending. He felt real. They walked slowly, without urgency, as though neither wanted the evening to end. Snowflakes danced through the air like shy confessions, brushing against their coats and eyelashes. The city, for all its towering noise and flashing windows, felt oddly quiet around them. Ethan's car was only a few blocks away, but they took the long way. "Funny," Nora said, her boots crunching on salted pavement. "When I was little, I used to imagine dates would be like those old movies. You know, a man offers you his arm, you get ice cream even though it's cold, and you end the night under a street lamp saying something poetic." Ethan glanced sideways. "Am I living up to that so far?" "Better," she replied. "You didn't try to show off or talk about your Tesla." He stifled a laugh. "Who says I have a Tesla?" She shrugged. "Everyone on those apps seems to. It's like a badge of honor now. Entrepreneur, crypto investor, dog dad. You'd be amazed how many think that's all they need to say." "I don't have a dog," Ethan offered. "Well, then you're halfway to being a decent human." They stopped by a little bookstore whose windows glowed faintly. A cardboard sign read, "Closing soon, final week." Inside, rows of books stood like forgotten friends. Nora's smile faded. "Places like that are disappearing. I used to think I'd open my own someday. Now I just shelve other people's dreams and rush to the next ride request." Ethan looked at her carefully. "Why don't you still try?" She shook her head. "Because rent exists, and dialysis, and because the world doesn't reward quiet dreams anymore. It rewards noise, filters, flash." He didn't say anything, but his chest tightened. Not because he didn't believe her, but because he lived on the other side of that noise. And he hated how right she was. They moved on. Passing a bakery that had closed for the night, Nora leaned against the window and sighed. "That place used to give out free pastries after 8 p.m. My dad and I would walk here when I was a kid. Pretend it was a celebration." Ethan leaned beside her. "What were you celebrating?" "Nothing," she smiled. "That was the point. We celebrated on ordinary days, just to make them feel special." He looked at her. "That's beautiful. You'd be surprised how many people think it's pathetic. I'm not one of them." She turned toward him, her face softly illuminated by the glow of the streetlight. "You know," she said, voice lower now, "I was ready to bolt tonight. I didn't want to sit across from another guy pretending to be something he's not. I thought, maybe if I show up and it's bad, at least I'll have a funny story." "Do I make a good story?" he asked, teasing. "No," she whispered. "You make a good memory." The words were gentle but landed with force. They stood like that for a long time, the world spinning quietly around them. Then she tilted her head and smiled. "You know what the best part of tonight is?" "What?" "You didn't try to fix me. You just walked beside me." He swallowed hard. "Maybe I wanted to be someone worth walking beside." "You are." She checked the time and winced. "I have to be up at 6. He nodded reluctantly. "Let me walk you to the station." They took one last stroll down a narrower street where snow settled undisturbed. Nora paused suddenly and looked up. "I love this corner." You can see 3 churches from here. I used to pretend the bells were sending messages to each other." Ethan looked up, too. "What did they say?" She smiled wistfully. "Just 3 simple things. Be kind, stay, and come back." Ethan blinked, the words settling deep in his chest. They reached the station steps, where she turned and looked at him one final time. "I still don't know your name," she said. "You never asked." She laughed. "That's true." She extended her hand. "Good night, driver." He took it, held it longer than necessary. "Good night, Nora." She stepped down the stairs, then paused. "You're not like the others." "I'm really not." She nodded, then disappeared into the tunnel, leaving Ethan alone with the falling snow, the 3 church towers, and the silent ache of wanting just one more minute. He didn't even realize he'd been holding his breath until she was gone. And for the first time in his adult life, Ethan Duvall found himself hoping someone wouldn't forget him. Not for his last name, not for his fortune, but for how it felt to walk beside her. The next morning, Nora stood behind the library's help desk, scanning in overdue returns with autopilot efficiency. Her mind, however, was nowhere near the barcode novels or the soft hum of fluorescent lights overhead. She kept thinking about the driver, the way he listened, the way he didn't flinch when she spoke about her father's illness or her failed dreams, and the way, just once, she felt like someone saw her not as a burden but as a person. She didn't even know his name. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Sasha, her roommate, serial romantic, and amateur chaos agent. "Sasha, so, did you ghost your millionaire date or what?" Nora frowned. "Nora, what are you talking about?" "Sasha, the guy I matched you with, Ethan something, tech genius, supposed to be loaded. I gave him your profile. He reserved a table at Leora. Don't tell me you bailed." Nora stared at the screen. The cinnamon tea turned cold in her stomach. "Nora, I didn't meet any Ethan. I met a driver who said the date fell through. We got coffee." "Sasha, wait, what?" "Nora, he was honest. Real. Not some prepped-up show pony." "Sasha, gee, Nora." She didn't answer. Her heart thudded louder than the beeping scanner. Something clicked into place, or maybe something cracked. Later that afternoon, Nora found herself standing outside the cafe again. Oliver's Nook. Only this time it was just a waypoint. Her eyes drifted to the boutique hotel next door, where a valet greeted a man stepping out of a familiar black car. Not the driver. Him. Ethan. He stepped out dressed in a sharp coat over a dark sweater, phone pressed to his ear, giving calm, quiet instructions. The driver was behind the wheel now, Damien nodding at the valet. She didn't move, just stared. And then, as if sensing her presence, Ethan turned. Their eyes locked. He froze. Nora's expression gave nothing away. She turned, calmly walked across the street, and entered the cafe. She sat in the same seat as last night, ordered the same tea, and stared out the window as snow began to fall again. Moments later, the door jingled open. Ethan approached slowly. No coat this time. No act. "Can I sit?" he asked. She didn't answer, but she didn't say no. He sat. "I wanted to tell you," he said quietly. "But you didn't. I didn't think the night would go like that. I thought it'd be 15 awkward minutes. I didn't expect you." Nora looked down at her tea. "You were pretending to be someone else. I was trying to be no one at all." She looked up sharply. "Why?" Ethan hesitated. "Because people don't see me anymore. They see headlines, net worth, magazine covers, The last woman I dated ran a blog post about my cutlery choices. I wanted to know if someone could like me without knowing any of it. And you thought the best way to test that was by lying? I didn't mean to. I was going to leave. Then you showed up and you looked tired. Real. And you said thank you. Her voice broke slightly. You were the only honest one. I wasn't. Not then. But I wanted to be. A long silence stretched between them. Nora reached into her bag, pulled out the small paperback she'd carried the night before, the one she used like a shield, and set it on the table. Do you know what this book's about? He shook his head. It's about a girl who finds truth in the most unlikely places. And when the truth disappoints her, she chooses to forgive anyway, because the connection mattered more than the deception. He leaned forward. Is that what you're doing? I haven't decided. He looked at her, really looked at her, and said softly, I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to deserve it. She stood up slowly, wrapping her scarf around her neck. I need time. He nodded, rising to his feet. Then take all the time you need. I'll still be me, with or without the title. Nora paused at the door, her hand on the knob, her voice softer than snowfall. I liked the driver. I just don't know if I like the millionaire. Then she left, and Ethan stood alone in the place where the lie ended and where, just maybe, the truth could finally begin. The following week passed in gray silence. Nora worked her shifts at the library and her evening rides, each day folding into the next like paper, thin, fragile, and quietly forgettable. She hadn't heard from Ethan. Part of her was relieved. Another part, the smaller, lonelier one, kept checking the street corner near Oliver's Nook every time she passed. She hadn't told Sasha what really happened. Not about the cafe or the snow or the tea. Not about how it felt to sit across from someone and be heard without judgment. Or how it felt to learn you'd been lied to by the only person who made you feel seen. She shelved books. She wiped cafe crumbs off her coat. She pushed through. And then, on a rainy Thursday, something small arrived at the library. It was a package. No return name. Just a simple box wrapped in brown craft paper with her name written in delicate penmanship. Nora frowned, wiping her hands before slicing it open with a letter opener. Inside, a copy of the same paperback novel she carried everywhere. But this one was new. A bookmark stuck out from one chapter. She opened it, expecting something flashy or self-pitying. Instead, she found a handwritten note, quiet and spare. You said honesty is a gift. I didn't deserve yours that night, but I'd like to earn it page by page. She stared at the note for a long time, then flipped the book shut, heart pounding. That same afternoon, her father called her from the dialysis center. Hey, sweetheart, he said gently. I think someone made a mistake with the bills. Her stomach twisted. What kind of mistake? They said we're covered. Completely. For the next year. Some new donor grant kicked in. But when I asked for a name, they just smiled and said, it was anonymous. Nora sat down hard on the bench outside the library, the rain soaking through her coat. She knew. Somehow, without any fanfare, he had done this. Quietly, without needing credit. A few days later, she arrived at the library to open early and found something odd. A small cardboard donation box had been placed discreetly near the checkout. It had a handwritten sign, for stories that still deserve to be told. And beneath it, Duval Foundation Literacy Fund. She touched the edge of the box like it might disappear. No one made an announcement. No ribbon cutting. Just a quiet kindness, folded neatly between days. Like the way he'd folded himself into that driver's role. Not to trick her, but to hide from the world long enough to find something real. Later that evening, Nora took the long way home. She stopped by the same corner with the 3 church towers. She looked up. Be kind. Stay. Come back. The bells didn't ring, but something inside her did. That night, she opened the book again, rereading the chapter where the girl forgives. Not because she's weak, but because love is stronger when it's built on truth. She held the note between her fingers, whispering to herself, earned, not bought. And finally, she knew where she had to go. She wasn't sure he'd be there. Snow had returned overnight, dusting the city in soft white. Nora walked through the same streets, past the bookstore window now shuttered, past the bakery that still smelled faintly of hope. Her boots pressed quiet prints into the untouched sidewalk. And then she saw it, the bench, the one near the 3 church towers. And him. Ethan sat there alone, wearing a dark coat dusted with snowflakes, his elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped loosely. He wasn't looking at his phone or glancing at passing strangers. He just sat like someone waiting for something or someone with no guarantee they'd come. Nora stood at the edge of the street, watching him for a moment. He hadn't changed much. Still quiet, still composed. But something about the way his shoulders sagged made her realize he hadn't just missed her. He'd needed her. She crossed the street, slowly. He didn't see her until her boots crunched just a step away. Then he looked up, and for a heartbeat, the entire city seemed to still. I didn't expect you, he said quietly. I didn't know I'd come, she answered. They stared at each other, the silence between them not awkward this time, but filled with things too real for words. He stood. I didn't want to push. I thought. I read the book, she interrupted. He nodded. And I know about the foundation, she added. His breath caught. And about my dad's treatment being covered. He exhaled, hands in his coat pockets. I didn't want to make you feel owed. I don't, she said softly. But I feel seen. He stepped closer just a little. Nora, I wasn't trying to test you. I was hiding. From people. From being used. From everything. But you made me want to be known again. Not just for my name, but for who I am when no one's looking. She tilted her head slightly. And who is that? He swallowed. A man who fell in love with a woman at a cinnamon-scented cafe. A woman who told him the truth when he didn't deserve it. Who walked beside him like he mattered. Who made him feel like a person, not a prize. A breath escaped her lips like a sigh. He looked down, voice lower now. But I lied, and that matters. It did, she admitted. But then you told the truth. Quietly, in pages, in boxes, in unspoken kindness. Her voice softened even more. And that matters more. He looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. Nora stepped closer, standing just inches from him. You're still my favorite driver, she said, smiling faintly. He blinked. Then he laughed, the sound soft, full of relief and wonder. You still have the book? He asked. She pulled it from her bag, holding it up. Right here. He reached into his coat and pulled out a matching copy from his inner pocket. They both laughed this time, the air warming between them. Where to, Miss Jensen? He teased gently, offering his arm. She didn't hesitate. She slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow and whispered, Anywhere, as long as it's real. They began walking, leaving the bench, the bells, and the snow behind, no longer hiding, no longer pretending. Just a girl and a man, learning how to walk side by side in a world that finally felt honest enough for both of them. The cafe had changed. Not the soul of it. Oliver's Nook still served its signature cinnamon tea, still had the mismatched chairs and quiet music, but something about it felt warmer now, fuller, like it had found its heartbeat again. Maybe because of the woman who now managed it during the mornings. Nora moved behind the counter with ease, pouring a fresh pot of tea while chatting with an elderly customer about a new book club they'd started. She wore her same old boots, still slightly scuffed, and a soft green cardigan with the sleeves pushed up. A pencil held her hair in a messy bun. She looked completely at home. The bell above the door jingled. A man stepped in, holding a bouquet of wrapped pages. Not flowers, but pages from first editions, each carefully folded into the shape of petals. He held them out without a word. "You're ridiculous," she whispered, taking them with a grin. "And you're late," Ethan replied, kissing the top of her head. She leaned into him for a brief second, then pointed toward the back room. "Go check the shelves." Shipment came in. He wandered past the tables, greeting two familiar patrons on the way. The back room had been converted, half storage, half reading corner, complete with beanbags, fairy lights, and a chalkboard that read, "The Honest Shelf. Take one, leave one, share one." The door chimed again. A young boy entered with a book clutched to his chest. He headed straight for the donation shelf and placed it gently inside. Ethan watched. "I still can't believe you built this," Nora said from behind him, watching the boy too. "You helped," he said. "You named it." "I just remembered what mattered," she whispered, their fingers intertwined. Outside, snow had started falling again, soft and steady. The city moved on as it always did, loud and rushed and unaware of the quiet miracles tucked between cafe walls and library stacks. But inside this little corner of the world, everything had slowed. No lies, no pretending. Just a man who once hid behind a steering wheel, and the woman who saw right through him and stayed anyway.